Hey everyone! Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button because Diana's story is one that's going to stay with you long after this video ends. Let me take you to a small town in rural Montana, because that's where this all begins. Diana had been teaching 3rd grade in the same school for 19 years. Small town, population barely scraping 3,000. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone and your business is everyone's business. She loved teaching. Loved those kids. Loved watching their faces light up when they finally understood fractions or finished reading their first chapter book. For almost 2 decades, it was her calling, her purpose, the thing that got her out of bed every morning. Then her mom got sick. Alzheimer's, the cruel kind that steals someone piece by piece while their body keeps going. Diana was an only child. Her dad had passed years earlier. So it fell to her, the doctor visits, the medication management, eventually moving her mom into her small house because the nearest memory care facility was 40 miles away and cost more than Diana made in a year. She became a full-time caregiver on top of being a full-time teacher. Anyone who's dealt with Alzheimer's knows it's not just about memory loss. It's the anger, the confusion, the moments where your loved one looks at you like you're a stranger, or worse, like you're the enemy. Diana's mom would wake up at 2 a.m. demanding to go to work at a job she hadn't had in 30 years. Would accuse Diana of stealing from her. Would cry for her own mother who'd been dead for 40 years. And Diana would handle it all with patience and love and grace during the night, then go teach 23 8-year-olds the next morning like everything was fine. Except everything wasn't fine. By the spring of 2023, Diana was barely holding on. She'd stopped smiling. Completely. One of her teaching assistants pointed it out. "Miss Diana, I haven't seen you smile in months. Not a real one, anyway." And Diana realized it was true. She'd perfected this polite, professional expression that passed for contentment, but actual joy, actual happiness, that was gone. She couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed. The last time she'd felt anything other than exhausted and sad and guilty, guilty that she sometimes resented her mother, guilty that she wasn't patient enough, guilty that she was failing at everything. One afternoon in May, Diana was in her backyard trying to get 5 minutes of peace. Just 5 minutes where nobody needed anything from her. Her mom was napping, finally, and Diana had 30 minutes before she needed to start dinner. She was sitting on her back steps, staring at nothing, when she heard this rustling in the bushes by her fence. Out walked this enormous orange tabby cat. And I mean enormous. Easily 20 pounds, maybe more. He waddled, there's no other word for it, straight across her yard like he owned the place, hopped up on the step next to her, and sat down. Just plopped himself right there and started grooming his paw like this was his house and Diana was the visitor. Diana stared at this cat. The cat ignored her, focused entirely on his grooming routine. She'd never seen him before, and in a town this small, she knew most of the local pets. "Who are you?" she asked out loud, not expecting an answer. The cat paused his grooming, looked at her with these intense copper eyes, then went back to his paw. Diana laughed. Couldn't help it. This cat's audacity, his complete confidence, the absurdity of him just appearing and making himself at home, it cracked something open. She laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. The cat started showing up every day. Same time, around 4 p.m. He'd waddle into her yard, hop onto the step, sit next to Diana if she was outside, or meow at the back door if she wasn't. She started calling him Hank because he looked like a Hank, sturdy, no nonsense, solid. She'd give him treats, scratch behind his ears, and for those few minutes every afternoon, she'd forget about everything else. Just existed in the moment with this giant orange cat who'd decided she was worth visiting. About 2 weeks into Hank's visits, Diana's mom had a particularly bad night. Didn't recognize Diana at all, was terrified and combative, kept screaming that a stranger was in her house. Diana finally got her calmed down around 3 a.m., got her back to bed, then went to sit in the kitchen and cry. Just absolutely fell apart. She was so tired. So sad. So completely out of reserves. 4 a.m., she heard scratching at the back door. She opened it, and there was Hank. Not his usual time, nowhere close, but there he was. He walked in like he'd been invited, first time he'd ever come inside, went straight to Diana, and climbed into her lap. All 20+ pounds of him. Started purring so loud it sounded like a diesel engine. And Diana just sat there on her kitchen floor, crying into this cat's fur, while he purred and occasionally headbutted her chin like he was saying, "I know. I got you. It's okay." That became their new routine. Hank started coming inside. He'd follow Diana around the house, this massive orange shadow. When she was cooking dinner, he'd sit in the kitchen and supervise. When she was grading papers, he'd sprawl across her desk. When she was dealing with her mom's difficult moments, he'd be nearby, like a furry anchor keeping her tethered to something beyond the crisis. And most importantly, he made her smile. Made her laugh with his antics, the way he'd try to fit in boxes way too small for him, the way he'd chirp at birds through the window, the way he'd steal socks and hide them behind the couch. Her teaching assistant noticed the change. "You're smiling again." Like, really smiling. What happened? Diana showed her a picture of Hank. A cat happened. Here's the thing about caregiving, it's incredibly isolating. Your friends mean well, but they don't understand unless they've been through it. They'll say things like, "Take care of yourself," or "Make sure you get rest," like those are choices you can just make. Like you can schedule self-care between medication times and doctor visits and cleaning up messes and dealing with someone you love not knowing who you are. The isolation is crushing. You're surrounded by people who care about you, but nobody can actually help carry the weight. Except Hank helped. Not by solving anything. Not by making the Alzheimer's easier or giving Diana more hours in the day. But by being there. By being consistent. By showing up every single day and saying, through his presence, "You're not doing this alone." He gave her something to look forward to. Something that was just hers, that had nothing to do with duty or responsibility. Something that chose to be with her because he wanted to, not because he needed something from her. Diana's mom passed away that following October. Peaceful, in her sleep, which was the best-case scenario in a situation with no good outcomes. The grief was complicated, relief mixed with loss, guilt mixed with sadness. Diana took a week off school, the first time she'd taken more than a single day in almost 3 years. And Hank was there through all of it. When she couldn't sleep, he'd sleep on her chest. When she'd cry, he'd headbutt her hand until she pet him. When she'd sit and stare at nothing, he'd bring her his favorite toy mouse, drop it in her lap, and wait for her to throw it. It took months for Diana to feel like herself again. Grief doesn't have a timeline, and complicated grief even less so. But slowly, she found her footing. Started noticing things again, the way the light hit the mountains in the afternoon, the sound of her students laughing at recess, the taste of her morning coffee. Small things that had been there all along but that she'd stopped having the capacity to notice. And Hank was part of that healing. Every day, his steady presence reminded her that life wasn't just obligation and loss. It was also moments of connection. Moments of joy. Moments where a giant cat steals your sandwich when you're not looking and you can't even be mad because it's so absurd you have to laugh. Diana eventually found out Hank had another home. He belonged to a neighbor 3 houses down. But that neighbor worked long hours, and Hank had apparently decided he needed 2 families. The neighbor didn't mind, said Hank had always been independent, that he was glad Hank found someone who needed him. Because here's the truth about cats, they always know who needs them most. Diana still teaches 3rd grade in that same small Montana town. Still loves those kids. But now she smiles again. Really smiles. Her students drew pictures of Hank for her classroom wall. He's become an unofficial class mascot. And every afternoon at 4 p.m., Hank still shows up, still waddles into her yard like he owns it, still demands his treats and his ear scratches. He's older now, a little slower, but he's there. Constant. Reliable. Proof that even in the darkest times, there's still connection to be found. I asked Diana what she'd say to other caregivers, other people drowning in responsibility and grief and exhaustion. She said, find your Hank. Find something that's just for you, that brings you even 5 minutes of joy. It won't fix everything. It can't. But it'll remind you that you're still human, that you're still capable of feeling something other than tired. And some days, that reminder is what keeps you going. So here's my question for you, who have you been during your hardest times? And who helped you remember how to smile again? Was it a cat? A pet? A person? A moment? Drop it in the comments because these stories matter. Because someone reading this is in the middle of their hardest time right now, and they need to know they are not alone. They need to know that Hank shows up. Maybe not in the same form, maybe not in the way you expect, but he shows up. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hit that like button if this one got you, subscribe if you haven't already, and go give your cat some love. Tell them they are doing important work. Because they are. Until next time, remember, even in the darkest seasons, there's still light. You just might need a 20-pound orange cat to help you see it. Meow for now.